Good morning. Welcome to User-Focused Observability 101, how Android devs can use data to ask questions of your app in production. My name is Hanson Ho. I am an Android architect at Embrace. We are a user-focused observability platform for mobile and web, but I'm not really going to talk about our company. Instead, I'm going to focus on these three things. First, I want to define observability and user-focused, and make sure you know that these are not buzzwords, that these have concrete meaning. I also want to show you what you can do with user-focused observability, not just monitoring and not just debugging. And very quickly, I'm going to talk about OpenTelemetry. For those of you who know about it, good. For those of you who don't, no worries. Two non-goals that I have today is, first, I'm not going to talk about instrumentation. I don't really care how you get data from your device over to your server. That's not this talk. This talk is about using that information. I'm also not going to talk about Embrace very much. If you want to know about us, we are out there. We've got a booth. You can also ping me. But today, I'm going to focus on the topic at hand. Before we do that, let's start with a story. So you have a product manager that comes to your desk or your Slack or whatever and says, Google Analytics is showing that checkout conversion has gone down 25% last week. Total orders didn't, so it's not super important, but it's still important. Why? You, as the Android engineer, says, well, I'm not sure. Let me go take a look. OK, you're back to your desk now. Now what? Well, you're going to have to shrink the surface area of what you're going to look for. So you can ask some questions of yourself. Did we release a new version recently? Did we turn on a feature flag? Basically, you want to figure out what changed. Why did it not happen before, and why is it happening now? Well, you go look through the code, and oh yeah, somebody made a change, and we released a change last week, and oh, there's the bug. And you find it, and you fix it, and you ship it, and it's done. Easy, right? Production issues are always this easy? Uh-huh. No, not really, unfortunately. So debugging a prod issue can be this easy if you know what to look for and where to look for it. You know what the root cause is, then it's easy. Or if you can reproduce the bug on your own device, also pretty easy. But when the cause is multifactorial or non-obvious, or when there are no apparent app regressions, oh, that's when it gets tricky. And that's when observability comes in. So what is observability? Is it crash reports? Is it performance data? Is it tap navigation, network requests, things that we call real user monitoring? Well, no, not really. That's just telemetry. And observability isn't just about using telemetry to see what happens, to find bugs. I mean, you can use it for that. But tests are better for finding core regressions in both performance and functionality. Observability is good for finding the edge cases, but you better have a good test suite before you actually think about production data. Observability also isn't just about debugging regressions. Tools like Perfetto or Leak Canary that give you lots and lots of detailed information in a very controlled environment, those are perfect for debugging. Use those. Observability also isn't about just using telemetry to reproduce bugs. That's just real user monitoring and session replay. Click this button, see it crash. Oh, they must be related. You can use it for that, but it's not just that. It's also not ways to find changes to metrics in production. That is just monitoring. P50, app startup time, all that stuff. It gives you an idea of what's going on in the aggregate. And knowing all that is great. Information about what's happening in your app is fantastic. You need that. But knowing is only half the battle. Observability is about explaining telemetry changes. Now, my favorite definition of observability comes from Hazel Weekly. Her blog post is right there, and she says, observability is a process through which one develops the ability to ask questions, get useful answers, and act effectively on those answers. Observability is a process, or process, I guess, this is Europe, to explain changes to telemetry in prod. Explain changes to telemetry in prod. Now, observability needs more than just telemetry. It also requires context. What do I mean by context? Well, it's basically just metadata about your runtime environment. You have static things like app version, locale, or dynamic things like network type, bandwidth, maybe even custom things like the type of user that's currently using the app. Whatever you need to answer questions. Now, this enables you to filter and group, and you can start segmenting your user base to see who gets what experience. Observability also requires relationships. Relationships between telemetry. Things like parent-child. You have a workflow has a sub-workflow that depends on it. You have session affinity, where telemetry is tied to a single session. You have ordering. A happens before B. All this allows you to start correlating, and maybe even looking at causation if you have experimentation frameworks. So to amend our definition of observability being a process that uses context and relationships, to explain changes in prod that uses context and relationships to explain changes in prod. Got it? Let me repeat it. Observability is a process that uses context and relationships to explain changes to telemetry in prod. All right? Now let's talk about the other thing I brought up, the adjective phrase, user-focused. What the hell does that mean? Well, it refers to the nature of telemetry that you're recording. You don't only need what happens in the app. That's great. But what you actually need is for that telemetry to be linked to user behavior. What you want to do is model intention and outcome achievement. Because when someone uses your app, they don't care about how fast it is. They care about whether they're able to do what they want to do when they open your app and click the button. Did the user do the thing they want to do? Was that achieved? That is the prime question of user-focused observability. What happens in the app is nice to know. It's good to know how fast things are. It's good to know what happened prior to it. But what matters is outcome. Outcome. What matters is user impact. You want to measure changes to that. You want to explain why things change with user impact. Observability is a process, and so is user-focused observability. It also uses context and relationships to explain changes to telemetry and prod that impacts user. This is user-focused observability. It's not monitoring, it's not debugging, it's understanding how users are impacted by changes to your app. If you got this, you got user-focused observability. So let's go back to our product manager from before. Well, why did the conversion rate change, huh? Well, if you had user-focused observability, you can start answering this. Well, first you need telemetry to have user-focused observability. So for the checkout workflow, the workflow starts when the checkout button is tapped. That's a proxy for user intention. The workflow ends when confirmation screen loads, or when the workflow is abandoned, or if there's a crash. Basically, anytime someone starts a workflow and doesn't finish it, you need to know that. And that's the proxy for your outcome. So the conversion rate, which you see a lot in product analytics, but not so much in monitoring or observability, is the successful outcome over intention. Basically, the chance of users being able to get value from your app, to get what they want when they started picking up your app and doing stuff. If you have user-focused observability, you also have context. You have things like standard metadata, like app version, and custom metadata, like user info, payment info, things like that. And your telemetry are related. So all the telemetry from the workflow to RUM events are all associated with a session. You can know what happened before someone went to check out, or the properties of what they're trying to buy, things like that. So when the conversion rate drops, you can start asking questions. You can ask questions like, is the change even statistically significant? Well, in this case, yeah, 25%, that's pretty big given the sample size. And was this change outsized for some cohort? You can start slicing and dicing, and yes, you found that for heavy users, it's down, not just 25%, it's down 60%. Whoa, I didn't know this was that big. Well, did any other metrics change for this cohort? Yeah, they did. Orders per users are lower, but not quite as low, only about 20%. So people are failing more often, but they're still ordering more than the failure. What's going on? Or are the other common app events that happened prior to the failure? Well, yeah, there was. Failure is often followed by having a discount code being applied. Oh, discount code, okay. Oh, wait, but some successes also had a discount code applied, so it cannot caused it, right? Well, maybe a new bug came up in the discount code. Oh, but we didn't ship a new app version, so there couldn't be new code. In fact, the conversion rate doesn't even change. You cut by version. What is going on? Any other new events correlated with failures? No. Oh, okay. What about success? Any events correlated with success? Yes, there are. Successful checkouts are often correlated with a navigation away from the checkout screen. So, conversion rate of heavy users dropped. The rate of total order didn't by as much. Discount code usage is correlated with failure. There's no app change. Navigation away, checkout screen correlated with success. So much information. But the app didn't change. The app didn't change. Something on the back end, maybe? So a bunch of stuff happens, you talk to people, you think, and after considering all the evidence, you found that there was an issue. The issue is that the discount code issued by the backend has a new format. They changed the UUID version or something. And so new discount codes disabled the purchase button on first application. And you have to navigate away to reset the button state to come back to do the checkout. So basically, every time a user tries to use a new discount code, they have to abandon the workflow first before actually coming back and using it. So every purchase with a discount code means you have to first fail. That's why the rate crashed. All users are impacted, but heavy users are more impacted because they get more discount codes. So the data becomes more glaring and becomes statistically significant. So they would disproportionately impact. Basically, what you're telling me is that a seemingly innocuous backend change triggered a non-obvious app bug. That's not even a bug, maybe, because you don't want to deal with every version of UUID under the sun. And it only happens to a subset of users who use the discount code, but only sometimes. Well, this is kind of hard to figure out unless you know the problem. Or you've done this a lot, or you're just making something up for a presentation. But it shows you that it is very difficult sometimes to debug issues in production when it only impacts a small set of people. But importantly, it impacts people who are paying for stuff, and that matters. That 5% of order drop may not be statistically significant, but somebody went in there, tried to apply the code, and it didn't work, and they stopped buying. That matters. That's dollars. And you're probably not going to have a test case for that. So I'll assume I've convinced you. You may want to ask, how do I get this awesome stuff? Well, you have to get some observability infrastructure. You need an SDK that helps you record telemetry, send it back, all that. a backend that processes, pre-processes, and UIs to make the question asking possible. And you need people to actually stand up the infrastructure and maintain it. That is a lot of work and a lot of money. Buying is obviously the quickest path. But if you build, which a lot of companies want to do because they have more control, and they can link it with their backend, all the data, consider using OpenTelemetry. This is a lightning talk, so I don't have a ton of time to go into detail. But OpenTelemetry is the de facto standard of observability for the backend. It is a protocol. It's got spans. It's got logs. And it's quite good for the backend because it was designed for distributed tracing. On Android, it is technically supported. It technically works. But not only is it in Java, it also has a backend-centric view on how operations should be recorded. So, there's some additional friction that you have to overcome to use it. But help is on the way, especially those of you who played with OpenTelemetry and Android and saw the API and saw all this Java stuff. You're like, oh, this is gross. I can't even use it in my KMP app. Well, that's about to change. There is a mobile-first Kotlin OTel API and SDK on the way. The donation proposal is being evaluated at OpenTelemetry. And yes, it works on KMP too. If you have a KMP app and use OTel, now you have to have an iOS SDK, a Swift SDK, a Java SDK. If it works on web, you have to have JavaScript SDK, and basically do telemetry on that layer. Soon, you won't have to. Embrace is leading the effort because we are the most interested in OTel on mobile. But the goal is to create a thriving OTel community in Kotlin. So we are actively seeking contributors to give input to the API, to help with developing the SDK, and contribute, make this a proper open source project. So to recap, user-focused observability is a process that uses context and relationships to explain changes to telemetry and prod that impacts users. I said this like 12 times, so hope you might be the last time. Also, it means you can ask complex questions just through the data without having to repro anything. And you don't just have to know the facts. You have to be able to get questions and explain. So, I know it's not perfect, but don't wait. If this sounds appealing, just do it. Go to a vendor, set up some OTel infrastructure, whatever you do, get into it. And use OpenTelemetry if you can, because good stuff is coming there. So I want to end it with a quote from Audre Lorde. Sometimes you are blessed with being able to choose the time and arena and the manner of our revolution. But more usually, we must do battle where we stand. Don't wait for the perfect environment to start looking at this stuff. Just do it. And if there's time, I'll leave you with this. User-focused, mobile, and Ollie is a perfect match because mobile is chaotic. You don't know everyone who's using your app, and you sometimes don't know what happens to a minority of your users. So Android devs, use mobile observability. Use Molly. Get into it. Thank you.